Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the VECCI COVID-19 business webinar, brought to you in conjunction with Small Business Victoria. I'm Paul Guerra, Chief Executive of VECCI, and it's great to be with you today. Bit of an innovation theme here today, and I'm very much looking forward to interviewing my guest on what the decision points were that triggered the recent diversification in his business. 4 Pillars Gin, which I'm sure you've heard of, have certainly built a reputation for quality drinking products and are now in the business of making quality health products too. Matt Jones, CEO of 4 Pillars, will take us into the planning processes the company used to make the decision to diversify, and time permitting, he'll answer your questions. You'll be able to submit questions for Matt in the Q&A or chat function in Zoom at any time during the webinar. If we've got time, we'll take some of those. If not, we'll be sure to follow up on the webinar post this. I thought it worthwhile to spend a few minutes talking about the current environment. For many of us, the novelty of working from home has well and truly worn thin, and many of us are desperately worried about the continued impact COVID-19 is having on our own businesses. Over the weekend, the Premier announced an extension of the executive powers in a clear sign that restrictions are unlikely to be lifted soon. We are in the midst of a health crisis, and the government is acting on the advice of health experts to guide the population and, in fact, the country through. We may not like it, but I have to say the progress here is far easier to read than what we're seeing unfold in other parts of the world. If our good results continue, and that relies on all of us observing the social distancing guidelines, it will naturally give rise to reopening business and then the community. Rest assured, the Victorian Chamber will be front and centre when that time comes. Our opinion is that that time is still a little way off, but it's becoming clearer we are closer than what we thought possible. While it's frustrating, and in many cases it's debilitating, the quicker we can contain the virus spread, the quicker we can get on with business and life until the ultimate period when the vaccine will be ready. We cannot allow business in Victoria to die out. And I can assure you the conversations I've been having with the Treasurer Tim Pallas, Minister Martin Pakula, and Minister Adam Somyurek are all resonating the same. This government wants business to keep going and is ready to add further support to aid recovery when the time is right. My feeling is that with businesses in industries like construction showing what is possible, we have something solid to work with on how to get other industries up and working too. The self-isolation we're abiding by now will pave the way for speedier recovery. It's going to test my patience. It's probably going to test yours as well. And we naturally want to get going again. We're business people at the end of the day. But I balance this by wanting to have my parents around for a bit longer too. So let's bunker down. Let's look at what stimulus packages are on offer and get the planning underway to ensure that we have the plans and actions to follow through once we're given the amber light to start moving in readiness for the green light. I can't stress how important that is. And of course, whatever help you need, you can find it at www.victorianchamber.com.au or www.business.vic.gov.au. Now, it's my great pleasure to introduce my guest, Matt Jones, one of the 3 co-founders of 4 Pillars Gin, based in Hillsville in Victoria. In their short history, they've been showered with awards, including multiple gold medals and the prestigious International Gin Producer of the Year at the International Wine and Spirits Competition in 2019. They are a terrific example of a business adapting and innovating during the COVID-19 crisis by utilising their distilling process to make hand sanitizer and keep their business operating in very difficult times. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Paul. Morning, everyone.
Now, Matt, when I think of gin, I naturally think of tonic. How did you make the decision from going from producing gin and start making hand sanitizer in this crisis?
Look, it's funny you mentioned tonic. As you say, I'm one of 3 co-founders of 4 Pillars, and the other 2, Stuart and Cameron, I mean, they've known each other a lot longer than I've been part of that gang. And their first daydream was actually making tonic. I think they were drinking. They were about 5 G&Ts in, and they realised the gin was the fun bit. And so even before 4 Pillars began, there was a pivot to gin. But once we got into gin, that was clearly our game. We were and we are exclusively gin makers. We've never been tempted by distractions like vodka or other spirits. We've always believed what the world needs are dedicated specialists who do one thing brilliantly. And for us, that one thing was gin. And we really navigated the first 6 years of our business as makers, as gin makers, and as people on a pretty relentless growth curve, pursuing that passion for gin and many different gins and what we can do. And I'm wearing my Esplanade Hotel t-shirt today in honor of the grand old Espy down in St Kilda, and that reminder of what we've temporarily lost, and as you say, what hopefully will come back soon, our wonderful hospitality industry. And so making gins on our own, making gins with people like the Espy, making gins with other distillers, it's fueled this wave of growth, which has been a fantastic ride. So as you say, when the coronavirus turned up, the first confronting thing was realizing maybe we can't pursue that growth mindset for a while, and maybe actually failing to recognize that we're shifting from a growth phase into something quite different, hopefully temporary, but quite different. Failing to recognize that would have been really dangerous. So I think the first shift before we even get to hand sanitizer is just that shift in mindset of going, well, what we've been doing has been working, we've been growing, but clearly these new circumstances are going to require a new mindset.
So that's really thinking about your business in the moment.
Which is not always easy to do. When you're coming from an entrepreneurial background, a startup background, you're in that growth phase, you tend to be consumed by an optimism. There tends to be this sort of relentless drive forward, and actually forcing yourself to go, well, wait a minute, maybe we don't have the right to be optimistic at the moment. So, you asked about the pivot to hand sanitizer. I think it probably was the result of a few different forces coming together. I think one of them, as with all things in 4 pillars, a little bit of planning and a little bit of serendipity came together. So the serendipity first, because we are gin makers and exclusively gin makers, having that constraint forces you to be very creative. It's easy to be creative when there's no constraint. When there's constraint, you get very creative. So for us, what else can we do with making gin? And something we hate is throwing things away. We hate waste. So we distill with whole oranges. So now we turn them into an orange marmalade, working with a marmalade maker, a preservist in the Yarra Valley. We feed our spent botanicals to locally reared rare breed Berkshire pigs.
Is that a recent shift?
That's something we've been doing for the last 3 or 4 years, this sort of what we call this made from gin program of taking byproducts of distillation and finding partners in the Yarra Valley and around Victoria who can do things with them. So one of the little byproducts that we'd never commercialized was cleaning product. We took the heads and tails of the distillations, effectively the bit of alcohol that you throw away, and we used it in-house as a cleaning product. So when Cameron saw, and Cameron is always the relentlessly creative innovator at the heart of 4 pillars, when he saw what was going on in the world, he said, well, we need more sanitizer in-house just for our use. As we walk through every door, let's just clean our hands. Let's get on the front foot here. And so he started to add a little bit of aloe vera to this in-house cleaning product. And we never planned to scale it.
Yeah.
I think the other side was that quick mindset shift, that recognition that we shouldn't be ashamed of talking the language of survival.
Yeah.
We shouldn't be ashamed of saying, well, you know what, for the next 3 to 6 months, we, like most businesses, need to go into a kind of crouched position of survival mode. We don't need false bravado. We don't need to pretend everything's okay. It's not. Instead, let's think about what it's going to take to keep the lights on and navigate the next 3 to 6 months. Let's think about, just as our government, I think, as you say, is doing a great job of flattening the curve and buying us some time to figure out treatments and figure out testing and build healthcare capacity, we as businesses need to buy ourselves some time.
Yep.
We need to create that little bubble of survival and safety that allows us to then think about how we move forward. So for us, that then was, well, how do we drive revenue streams? How do we keep the lights on? How do we keep our staff busy? And the last piece of it was really those two coming together while the phones just started to ring and ring and ring. And they weren't ringing from consumers, from regular customers. They were ringing from healthcare professionals.
Right.
Desperate on the front line for a sanitizer product. So when you push those 3 things together, the decision we made was, let's try and meet that demand.
Yep.
And from there, if we can make a bit more, let's start to try and meet consumer demand as well.
Now, I know that the first pass was into that that health grade style. That was deliberate again.
Mm-hmm. Look, that's correct, and that was clearly the first need. That was the call that needed to be answered urgently. Yeah. And what we recognised was we could make a very simple product to the standards of the World Health Organization that would serve the needs of the front line. We also recognised, I think, and again, I've got to give Cameron the credit for this, that there was no point doing this if we couldn't scale it. Yeah. There's no point announcing on a Monday that we were going to make hand sanitizer and by Tuesday afternoon not having any. That would just create frustration and disappointment. So we actually took our time. As I say to people a lot at the moment, I am very much on repeat mode. This is a marathon, not a sprint. This is not a race to see who can be the first to adapt or the first to pivot. This is about what's going to be sustainable for a while. So Cameron really looked at how do we sustain production. He said, well, look, we can probably make two products. We can make a really simple product that has a high efficacy, meets the standards of the World Health Organization, works for the front line, and potentially we can scale that made from gin product, that product that uses the byproducts of distillation. It means we're drawing down on less raw ethanol, which is very much in short supply in Australia. We're actually taking advantage of our own gin production, and we can scale that for consumers.
It seems to me, as I hear you talk and spoken to you previously, that there's a really good rapport between the three of you and a nice tension that you're able to have those challenging conversations around where you're at. Is that how it plays out in real life? Is there a regular get together and a regular challenge around where you're heading and what you might do next?
Look, there is. We are co-founders. We are co-CEOs. We've chosen that sort of flat democratic structure since the beginning, and I think one of the reasons it works is we come at things from three distinct but complementary perspectives. So Cameron is ultimately, he's the pragmatist. He's the tinker. He's the guy who is always figuring out what we can make next and how we make it. I'm the strategist. I'm the brand guy. I'm maybe the thinker of the piece, the overthinker of the piece, and think about what are the implications for this and how do we communicate it, where does it go? And then Stuart is the connector. He's the guy who came from a background in journalism and PR. He's a phenomenal relationship builder and storyteller and connector and creator of possibilities and a pretty relentless optimist. So when you've got a balance of optimism and strategy and pragmatism, you've got someone who's making and on the front line of that, someone thinking about branding and someone thinking about sales and trade and relationship building. You've got some lovely natural complementary tensions there. And as you say, it's about that regular dialogue between the three of us and being open enough to be able to disagree constructively and get to an outcome.
I do think that is one of the recipes for modern day business, the ability to challenge respectfully, but do it in a way that enables the business to go forward. You're still producing gin, right? You haven't switched entirely to hand sanitizer.
Look, we haven't, and I think it's really important to note that we really would rather not be making hand sanitizer. I mean, it's fantastic. We talked very openly to the staff quite early on. I think, frankly, we were probably quicker off the mark at talking to our team about what was emerging in the world than a lot of businesses. And we talked quite openly early on about the scale of potential financial pain and the potential that might mean for needing to cut hours, cut salaries, and share that pain so we could navigate forward together. It gives me great satisfaction that at the moment we haven't had to go to that. We've got a busy bottling line. We've got a busy production team. We've got a busy team of both full-timers and casuals shipping both gin and hand sanitizer out to the world. So, thank God for hand sanitizer for keeping the lights on, but we would rather not be making it. We would prefer that the phone had never rung from healthcare professionals in the front line because there wasn't a shortage of supply. We'd prefer to be fully focused on gin. So we've made sure we do that. We'd been playing for about 6 months with the Kyoto distillery in Japan. As you kindly said, at the end of 2019, we were named the International Gin Producer of the Year. The previous winners were the Kyoto distillery in Japan. So we thought it was a good idea for the two most sort of awarded gin distilleries of recent times to make a gin together. So we did a Japanese meets Australian gin we called Changing Seasons Gin. It feels very aptly named for this time of dramatically changing seasons for all of us. But we released that about 10 days ago, and the reception's been phenomenal. And it shows that, I think a lot of us need a gin and tonic at about 6:30 in the evening, consumed responsibly. But I think we all need to take the edge off now and again. But also, it shows that people want positivity. They want colour. They want story. We haven't all just gone into our bunkers. And those of us lucky enough to be working and not have our incomes too challenged, we want some of those distractions from what otherwise is this sort of wall of noise about the coronavirus. So absolutely, we're continuing on the gin path. Our annual release of Bloody Shiraz Gin, which takes place on the 1st of June every year, will go ahead as planned. We've been working hard through vintage to bring in the grapes, soak those grapes in gin. We continue to make things from gin. We continue to think about who we'll collaborate with next. And we continue to get ready for a time when our hospitality business is back open. We are scheduled to be opening a new venue in Sydney, the first 4 Pillars permanent venue outside of Victoria, opening in Sydney's Surrey Hills in the middle of the year. And we continue to think about how to support people like the Esplanade Hotel and the bar trade. And when they get the chance to switch back on, they're going to become a huge priority for us to support them and make sure that people get back there and support those bars and pubs and restaurants that we all value so much. So yes, the gin business is still the main game, and the Sanitizer mini boom is us answering the call, keeping the lights on, but hopefully navigating to a time when, frankly, the big commercial producers of that stuff can get their acts together, fill that shortage, and we can get back to focusing on gin.
Interesting, Matt. The chat function going off, people wanting a gin and tonic right now. So Kelly, I'll give you permission to go ahead and do that.
It's 4 o'clock somewhere.
That's exactly right. Have you thought about, and it's amazing, Matt, we're a month into what feels like 12 months already, but we're a month into best described as not quite lockdown, but severe restrictions where hospitality and everything have been impacted. Have you thought about what your strategy looks like after this?
Yeah, so we're thinking in terms of 3 months a year and 3 years. And I think most of us, you talked about modern business, leaders needing to be able to challenge respectfully. I think also the time of having 3 or 5 year plans is long gone. We need much more agile and adaptable plans. So what we're trying to think about is let's call it the 3-month phase that we are in right now. And let's call that unapologetically the survival phase.
Yeah.
How do we make decisions that preserve our cash position, that maximize revenue opportunities, that minimize discretionary spending? We've got a policy of people above all. So that's led to decisions like people not paper. We've cancelled every order of any printed collateral. We love anyone on the webinar today who's received a bottle of 4 Pillars gin from us has probably received cocktail books and postcards and all lots of nice things that tell them about drinks, and we've just cancelled all of it.
Yep.
The only collateral we're trading with now is pre-existing stuff, because we would rather pay people another week rather than print more paper. Yep. So that survival phase is about minimizing discretionary spend, maximizing revenue opportunity, keeping the lights on, and giving us time to plan. The 12 months that kick off from 1st of July in our minds is a transition phase. There'll be a bunch of transitions happening at different speed. And I think I was going to say we're particularly affected by it, but there's probably a dozen industries that feel particularly affected by this, from travel and tourism to events to hospitality. But you look at our business, at some stage, international travel will resume slowly. We're at about 20% of our sales are in what's called travel retail, duty-free to you and me. So that will start to transition back. We're in about 30 markets worldwide. Every single one of those, without exception, has been decimated by the coronavirus response. We will see different markets recover at different speeds and in different ways. Our hospitality business in Healesville has obviously been shut down. That will at some stage reopen. People will start to come back. We will manage that in line with the guidelines around social distancing and responsible operation. So all of those will transition back. So we're starting to plan for a 12-month of transition. And as we navigate that, we'll start to think about what we're calling our new normal will be the other side of that. And I think all of us will need to figure out, what does that new normal look like? For some of us, the new normal will look exactly the same as the old normal. There will be no changes to human behavior. There will be no changes to the operating realities. For others of us, the new normal will be startlingly different. And for most of us, it will be somewhere in the middle. and figuring out what will have changed in terms of consumer discretionary spending, what will have changed in terms of the operating landscape, in terms of human behavior, in terms of the appetite for travel, for physical experience. How do these things affect your business? So we're starting to think about that. But as I said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
We need to survive this phase. We need to navigate that transition phase and start to think about what that new normal looks like and what it might take to be successful in that environment.
I love the 3 phases, Matt. You picked up on something that we're starting to do some work on. What does the consumer looks like at the end of this? Because it will change. The fact is, as humans, we adapt pretty quickly. And right now we're adapting into a new environment, which will have lasting effects on what we do when we come out of this. So I love the fact that you're thinking about
and I think it will, without taking too long, I think the thing that we all need to be conscious of is there are the changes we think will happen. You think about ourselves. Oh, we're going to be different as workers. We're going to have better meetings now because we've learned to have all these video meetings. We're going to be better as parents. We're going to take more time. We're going to be more mindful, all of that stuff. Probably a lot of that doesn't happen. 1 month after the lockdown lift, a lot of that doesn't happen. What will change are going to be more subtle things that we're perhaps not even aware of. Things that this period has made us conscious of around how we behave and how we spend and how we make decisions. And those more subtle changes are the ones that we need to spot and track how they're going to affect our businesses.
It's going to be responsibility of the leaders to really lead off the back end of this and keep the good things that we've learned in this phase in the process. Just before we get to questions, because I know there's a number there, Matt, if you had to give advice to business owners that are thinking about pivoting, what would it be?
Look, a couple of things. I think we've got to be careful with the language of pivoting. Because, you know, I think this sort of came from Silicon Valley. It came from that whole world of business startups that thought they would be one thing and then became something else. You know, they were developing an app for this, but along the way, what was only supposed to be 10% of that app's functionality became the main game over time. That's a true pivot.
And Zoom's a great example of that.
Right, absolutely. And so if that's the type of pivot you're talking about, where it is going to fundamentally change your business trajectory forever, I've probably not got good advice. That's a deep thought process. I think what 4 Pillars has undergone is a temporary partial pivot.
Yeah.
And so in that world of temporary partial pivot, the questions are you addressing a real need that could lead to revenue?
Yeah.
Are you doing something that you've got the right to do? You know, are you pivoting towards a need that you have a right to meet? Or are you pivoting towards a need that frankly other people can meet better than you? And are you doing things that actually can be in flow with your business and with your brand? Or are they going to be in conflict with those? And if you can put a tick next to those 4 boxes together, well, there's a need there. We've got a right to address it. It can work for my business operation and it's not going to be in conflict with my brand, then go for it. If it's temporary, if it's partial. I would urge you to think deeply before you made a more permanent pivot, because potentially this is just a short-term transition and that new normal might not suit that more permanent pivot.
So Matt, it sounds like the strong advice is be deliberate. Right? Don't do this half-hearted. You know, contemplate, act, be very deliberate about it and knowing what you're doing it for.
Yep, and think it through.
And I know you've got some questions there, and everybody please make Anne Wright welcome.
Hello. Yeah, there's been quite a few questions, so I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but kicking it off, Gemma asked, what do you think this means for the experience economy going forward?
Yeah, look, the experience economy, it's something I'm pretty passionate about. I noticed quite early on that a lot of industries were in pain. The events industry, the hospitality industry, the travel industry. And of course, the thing they've all got in common, they're all industries that rely on us wanting to get out of our homes, get off our sofas, get out from behind the Netflix and go and seek out an experience together in the physical world socially. I have to believe that human beings will want to continue to engage in that. That's going to come back. I think the critical thing for us at the moment is making sure our decisions support that. So for 4 Pillars, we're continuing to invest in our hospitality experience, the one that we're developing in Sydney, the one that we're planning to expand in Healesville. We're continuing to think about ways that we can support bars and restaurants when they come back. We continue to think about ways that we can support our event partners that we're so passionate about. So I hope and trust that the experience economy isn't gone. This is a fundamental part of what makes it so joyous to be human, but there's no question it's at risk right now.
We've got time for one more, Anne.
Yeah, Max asked one, which I think is very interesting for a lot of businesses. So it is a bit heavy, but what role has cash flow forecasting played for your business as you're going through this time? I think that's something that a lot of business owners would relate to.
Look, cash is critical. And I say this as a brand marketer who would prefer it if my career to date had never involved me looking at a P&L. But you've got to, and particularly at a time like this, there needs to be that realism. So yes, we quickly had to understand both the revenue hit that our business was facing based on a full shutdown and modeling scenarios that were realistic and realistically pessimistic, and then making sure we modeled that into cash flow. And that in turn informed thought processes around things like pricing. You know, we made sure from the outset that we could sustain and scale the creation of hand sanitizer because it could actually fund our business rather than sort of make stuff maybe at the same cost as a commercial industrial producer, but in a way that could no way sustain, keep the lights on, feed the mouths of our staff. So I think it's critical, and we're in a phase where not having to focus on your cash position every day is going to allow you to focus on your business and communication and people and customers and leadership. Having to focus on your cash position every day is going to mean you're probably not focusing on the things you should be focused on. So doing the things you need to do to secure that so you can get back to running your business is incredibly important right now.
That's been brilliant. You know, if I just summarize, I love the fact that you're prepared to challenge your mindset. As you said, you came into this with a growth mindset, but quite rightly challenged that, and then moved into survival mode, which wouldn't have been easy. You talk about it's okay to not be okay, provided you're doing something about it. And I think there's a message in that for everybody. You know, you look for something to scale, which I think was really important. You're prepared to challenge each other with that sort of mini committee and the structure that you set up from, you know, the creative, from the strategist in yourself and the connector in Stuart coming together. Move to a survival mode that enabled you to keep the lights on and will keep the lights on. And I think the last point that you touched on is really interesting, and I think one that will be part of the new norm in terms of shorter planning cycles. We're used to looking out 3-5 year horizons. You know, I suspect you're right. That 3 to 6 month horizon is about what we're going to look at now.
Look, I think it is, and just on the cash point and the short term point, and I would say this because of my background, none of that means we should stop investing in our brands.
Yeah,
we have to keep investing in the strength of our brands, in this idea that we stand for something more than our product today, that we are meaningful to our customers, that they have what I call a bias towards us, that they see our name, they see our logo, they see us in the world, and they feel positively about us. We have to keep investing in that. We can't just make short-termism mean we only invest in things that sell. Because actually, in a time like this, the other thing that's really critical is the strength of your brand, the strength of goodwill towards your business, the strength of your culture internally and your customer community externally. So you've got to keep investing in that. You just have to do it wisely and with an understanding of what is realistic and possible in the operating environment. Brilliant,
Matt. Thanks for incredible insight into your business and the openness. I know there are elements that everybody can take away from this. So I hope everybody's taken the opportunity to learn. And then with that learning today, go away and plan. Some of our members have also been creative. CGR is best known for their elite sportswear production. They've changed their manufacturing facility in Thomastown, Victoria, to produce these 3-ply material, non-woven, with spandex sides face masks. It's a brilliant pivot from where they are, and as you rightly talk about, Matt, I don't think that's going to be long-term, but it serves for now. One of our other partners, which is Casper's, are also owned by the George John Collins. They've teamed up together and are putting out meals, their pies and pasties or great meals from the Georgia and Collins, but have partnered up with another one of our members, Sutton Grange Winery. So you can not only order your meal, you can order your wine with it as well. And Matt, I know they're going to talk to you about adding a gin into that as well. I talked about today being about innovation. I would love to hear more about what your business is doing through this period and what are the things that you've thought through in terms of moving your business to another area, if only temporary, to keep the lights on, as Matt talks about. Well, that ends today's webinar, and I hope you've found it informative. Again, thanks to Matt and Four Pillars Gin. Don't forget, if you need anything for your business, visit us at www.victorianchamber.com.au. If you're a larger member, thinking about joining us at Melbourne Chamber, and if you're more into tourism, think about joining us via VTIC. Stay safe, stay isolated, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.